Today on the show, our guest is Tarra Mitchell, who is on the cusp of debuting her first and very exciting new book, The Yoga of Leadership, which is all about personal well-being and is connected to success to inspire and empower leaders to lead healthier, happier lives and better connect with their teams and engage their teams. Tarra's distinctive background in business and yoga have both contributed towards the conversation about leadership and consciousness. Tarra's corporate experience include, and let me see if I can get this right, directing billion-dollar fundraising events and ushering in commitments from capital institutional investors, that's a mouthful, in the private equity investment sector, forging new business ventures and relationships in Asia and Europe, and advising entrepreneurs and executives on financing and marketing strategies. Tarra's experience with yoga spans 2 decades, and she's a registered yoga instructor. She's studied extensively with master teachers and private mentors, and that's how she supports her research. It's an ongoing research, right? She's continuously evolving, changing, and adding new initiatives to her program. To follow Tarra, she can be found at www.tarramitchell.com and on Twitter and Facebook at Tarra M. Mitchell. We're going to start with where did you grow up? Did you grow up around these parts or away from the Boston area?
Away. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so the home of the black and gold, very die-hard sports fans and salt-of-the-earth people, a very friendly town. And my neighborhood was very different from Wellesley, that's for sure. I would say modest. Our home was 3 bedrooms and 1 shared bath between the 4 of us.
So you had 3 siblings?
No, 2. My mom, my stepfather, and my sister. So I have only 1 sibling, but yet
yes.
we 4 shared a little
yes.
tiny bathroom, which is a little different than
yeah.
the experience you get now in Wellesley, which I'm grateful for.
Right, that's so interesting. Are you the older or the younger sibling?
I'm the older sibling. So my sister still lives in Pittsburgh with my 3 nieces and nephews.
Oh, wow.
Married.
Good. And your parents are still there as well?
Parents are still there. My mom actually comes from a family of 11,
oh.
and my dad a family of 4. So I have a lot of aunts and uncles and a ton of cousins, and both families are still very close to one another, which I think is a beautiful thing. And so we spend a lot of time.
And they're all now practicing yoga.
Actually, I don't know if any of them are. I have a cousin that I'm trying to encourage who's he likes to run the races. He's on the race circuit, and I think he might dabble in it. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm going to make the prediction that after your book comes out, they will all be yoga practitioners. And
I'm not so sure.
Your parents will be the team leaders.
Maybe. We can always be hopeful.
Yes, that's right. Give us the description of the very interesting career you had before you got to this point of writing this awesome book.
Well, thank you. Yes, it was interesting. I've had a good run at it so far, and I'd like to think I'm young, and it's not over. That's for sure.
You are definitely very young, and it's not over.
So, so I went to undergraduate school at Penn State, and I found myself working in D.C. after graduation. I worked for a firm that had a government contract to process data for the commissary system for consumer product goods companies, and ended up being an account manager there, where I had a lot of responsibility. I had to learn how to present to Fortune 500 senior brand managers, and at one point even the vice president of a Fortune 500 company in a gigantic boardroom, and I was like 24. So that was a little nerve-wracking, but great experience.
So you've paid your dues.
Yeah, in one way or another, I think I've had a lot of experiences.
About being nervous.
Yes, I understand nervousness a lot, and I'm always nervous about speaking in front of people. And then I went to business school.
Right.
I have an international MBA. I got that in South Carolina, which at the time was only one of a handful of international business MBAs in the country. They've had a program for 40 years, and so part of that program was an internship. So I worked for Deutsche Bank in Germany. I was in the German track, And I was lucky because I worked for a man called Klaus Martini, who eventually became the global chief investment officer for Deutsche Bank itself, which was the biggest bank when I was there, biggest bank in the world when I worked for them. And when I was working there, it was also the ruble collapse, so it was the Russian financial crisis had started, and so that was just a really interesting time to be there.
Right.
And Germany was just about to convert from the Deutschmark to the euro, and it was also, we were preparing for that, so it was a great experience overall.
Wow.
Then I graduated and made my way to Manhattan, to New York City, where I worked for as a management consultant in the financial services sector. And there I had clients like JP Morgan was a longer term client of mine. And eventually I moved to Hartford, Connecticut to be closer to my fiance, as I guess you do. And so I was lucky at the time of my move because our building was adjacent the World Trade Center, and I left only 3 months before 9/11. And so that was a pretty lucky series of events. And then I found another job in the Hartford area with what I call a diamond in the rough kind of company called Landmark Partners. They do private equity, venture capital, and real estate investing. A leader in their field. And I worked for them for quite a while. I was in the marketing and investor relations track. I had to raise capital, and in time I was then directing these large capital raising events, and yes, upwards of $1 billion at that time. So I had the opportunity to travel a lot for that job, including Asia, Korea, Japan, Hong Kong. So
Europe
I learned a lot, and this broadened my perspective.
And you were traveling through Europe as well.
Traveled through Europe for business school, and I traveled through Europe for the company that I started, subsequent Landmark.
Oh, after that, okay.
So after a while of working for Landmark, I started to get a lot of incoming calls from recruiters for the next step up. And I mean, a lot of them, I think the market was pretty hot. And so I started thinking, well, what's next? What should I do next? And I decided that I wanted to try my hand at being an entrepreneur and starting my own investment fund. And I was really eager about starting my own culture. And so I found some partners, and we created a strategy that was investing in a sustainable clean energy investments, which was something I was drawn to. And we went out and set out to try to raise a fund. We had some success at nearly finding an anchor investor, and we're ready to start buttoning down that anchor when September of 2008 happened, and that was the global financial crisis, of course. And so we eventually lost our anchor investor because everyone's portfolios was hit, and so after about 5 months of trying to get the fund off the ground, I decided to call it quits, and that was early 09. And I just happened throughout all of that fundraising frenzy to get pregnant, so I had my son on the heels of it.
Well, you're not busy at all.
No, not busy at all. And so he's the most traveled baby in utero ever.
$1 billion fund, creating life, you know. That's all
creating
good.
life, well, we were raising 200, but.
Right. Well, that's sounds like it's enough work for about 3 or 4 people. That's a lot of business experience.
A lot of workaholic in me, yeah.
What made you? So I should ask you, what made you decide to write your book on yoga, and the yoga culture?
So I guess that's the second phase of life. That was life post my son. And in the middle of the global financial crisis. So I had done a little consulting, and I had time on my hands. There weren't a lot of great jobs, and so I said, what else can I do? And I was passionate about yoga. I had a yoga practice for many years at that point. And I thought, well, let me do one of these teacher trainings and learn more about the practice, mainly because I was curious about the practice and I liked it so much, not so much that I wanted to actually be a teacher, but I ended up being a teacher anyway. And so I signed up for a 200-hour teacher training with a man called Rolf Gates, and he's kind of a walking modern-day prophet. Funny, self-deprecating. He did a really great job at teaching us this somewhat esoteric material that I ended up bringing into my book and my writing. And so it was wonderful to have that time with him. And at the end of his training program, I had committed that I thought this material was relevant in a broader context than just to be stated in a yoga studio. So I thought to myself, well, I want to bring this helpful way of living to the business world in some way, which I felt was kind of my world. And so then we were relocated to Virginia on the heels of that, and I decided to continue my study and signed up again for what they call a 500-hour yoga teacher training under the tutelage of a woman called Miriam Ovisi, who owns a studio called Beloved Yoga there in Northern Virginia. And so I studied for another year, and we went much deeper in the layers, and I learned about the holistic framework for well-being then, and that serves as really the basis for how my book has come together. And so for many years to follow, importantly, her teacher training required a thesis. So she agreed to allow me to submit a few chapters of a book, and that really kicked off the writing of a book. I had already been doing a blog for about a year, but that really kicked off the book, which blended my life experience and my work experience with the yoga in a way that I intend to be helpful and useful, practical things that you can do. And so then I just embarked upon writing of the book. And in order to write it, I did a lot of additional research. I read a lot of other books and spent a lot of time attending workshops and mentorship under Miriam. And I also met, who is an important mentor of mine right now, Hari Kirtana Das, who is very steeped in the ancient texts, and he's been with me every step of the way because I really wanted to honor and what these ancient texts kind of were saying about humanity way back when, which really hasn't changed much compared to our needs today. And so I really wanted to honor those ancient texts, and I needed someone that kind of was farther along, knew much more than me, to help me along. So he's been great and really instrumental in helping me get this thing finished.
Right. Wow. Awesome. That's really interesting. And so tell us, I know I mentioned it, but tell us your website one more time. So that
thank you.
Viewers can log on.
My website is www.Tarra, Tarra, Mitchell, Mitchell, so that's 2 R's and 2 L's, .com. And if you sign up for my mailing list, I will let everyone know when the book is about to come out.
Awesome. Awesome. And having been a regular yoga practitioner yourself, what do you think these concepts and ideas that you discuss in your book, or why do you think these are essential for the individual as well as for teams of people within organizations?
So I focused my book on leaders because I know and have seen, been in environments where I know that the leaders have this trickle-down effect on the culture. How they are, what they believe, basically trickles down to the team beneath them, good, bad, and different. And so I directed this to the health and well-being of the leaders so that the leaders would take better care of themselves to show up happier and healthier, but also think about leading through their own set of embodied principles. And I know that once leaders connect how their personal well-being leads to success in their life, they'll be more enthusiastic about it, they'll be more communicative about what it is that they're doing, and they will begin to share it with others. And this will start to permeate downstream into the organization and into the culture, and they'll think of ways that they can also be helpful to their teams. And all organizations thrive when teams are happy, healthy, engaged, inspired.
Right. And from the preview that you sent me, I can already see that your book will be very applicable and inspiring for a wide range of people, from millennials to retirees. It's a wide appeal, wide range.
Yeah, I think so too. I have directed it towards the leaders because that was the demographic I wanted to target, and I really didn't think that anyone had written a book like this before that addressed the community that I wanted to address. But yoga is yoga.
Right.
So at the end of the day, any of the ways that you can support your holistic well-being is valid for any human on the planet. So certainly, certainly the book, you can extract a lot of value no matter who you are. The millennials are interesting because for some reason they've been born amongst themselves to be this more value-centric and principle-centric group of people. And so I think they'll buy into it, if you will, and like it. And they're looking for conscious companies that are doing good things. So they want to work for leaders that are thinking about these sort of things. And they want to work for work environments that feel this way. So I think that they'll adopt it, and they will be the future leaders. And if they can begin to take care of themselves and lead through principle from a young age, they'll be our next beautiful conscious leaders later on.
Right. And from your point of view, what benefits do you think that different readers who read your teachings and employ your teachings will be able to benefit from or incorporate into their lives?
It's a holistic approach, so there's a lot of benefits. Right. And what I really like about my book is that it's kind of a reference tool, mm-hmm. and it allows you to choose the things that you need or is reasonable that you can work on at this point in your life. And so if you're a person that struggles with being stressed and anxious, mm-hmm. then there are tools and practices in the book that help you manage stress, clear your mind, mm-hmm. and focus, right. Concentrate.
And let me ask you this, does it go into diet or any recommendations for
yes.
the holistic?
So if someone's struggling with their weight or I've given many ideas in what's called the physical chapter, because mm-hmm. there are 5 layers that I'm using in our well-being according to this ancient framework. Mm-hmm. And the first is physical. And so in that chapter I do talk about movement, both exercise and the yoga physical practice, diet, sleep. Those are the 3 primary contributors to our physical appearance, mm-hmm. and so I do talk about those things. Mm-hmm. And so if you're struggling with something physical, you can right. start there. If you're struggling right. with something mental, you can start there. And then I also the final layer of our being is more of a what I'll call self-actualization. So it helps you identify your purpose, mm-hmm. and find meaning in life, mm-hmm. reconnect to your job if you're starting to get bored. Maybe you can see it through fresh eyes in a different way, and also just pepper in little bits of joy. How do you, as a human being, show up in your bliss? Right. In your joy.
Right. Well, that's just so fascinating. So I've forgotten my next question because I'm so interested in what you've just said here. So give us a few examples of how putting these things into practice will be useful for corporate culture, because this is the individual, and then you also yeah. talk about corporate.
I do. The majority of the book is focused on how leaders can take care of themselves. Mm-hmm. So it starts with them, I believe. It starts with them, and then we can permeate down. Mm-hmm. Organizationally, if we start to move towards organizations that have healthier teams and that lead through principle, there's a lot of benefits that will come out of that. Some of them are obvious. Healthcare costs will decrease. Absenteeism will decrease. There'll be less of them taking anxiety and antidepressant medications, which is through the roof right now. They'll be less stressed and anxious because mm-hmm. they'll have more resilience and be better able to manage their daily work. And with a more clear and less stress-filled and less distracted mind, they will be able to make better choices and decisions. They'll be able to practice discernment. They'll be able to embrace a broader array of activities, opening their mind, being more creative, being more innovative. So there are countless. Embodying principle in an organization specifically will help mitigate risk, internal risk, external risk to the organization. Mm-hmm. And these are all kind of obvious things, but yeah, wow. There are a lot of benefits.
They're obvious and yet elusive.
Yeah.
Right?
To me, they're obvious. When you've been spending, when you're in your 5th year of this stuff, it's all pretty much obvious.
Right. And that's really intriguing. And when does your book come out? When is the launch date?
I'm working on my launch date now, and I am very much targeting fall, so soon.
Okay, good.
I'm hopeful soon. Maybe I'll come back again and tell you.
Yeah, I know. We'll have to come by your book launch, and so I can snag a copy.
Yes, definitely.
So, yeah. Potentials for personal benefit. Have you personally benefited? What are your experiences with personal benefit?
Most definitely. So I've always been an exerciser, and I had a yoga practice, but I don't think I appreciated what was going on in the class. That's why I wanted to study it.
Right.
Like, why do I like this? Why is it making me feel calmer? Why is it making me think differently? And
why do my muscles feel so
is this
good?
teacher? Yeah, is this teacher have some kind of mesmerizing power over me? I mean, what is this? So that's one reason why I started deciding to really study it. So I had a yoga practice, but since I started studying the practice of yoga, I now have a meditation practice. I didn't have that before, and I know that creates more calm and equanimity in my day, which is beneficial to my kids, my husband, to everyone in my life. And I never thought about my breath before, which is a big part of yoga. I did not have a relationship with my breath. I didn't think about my nervous system and how my breath, my nervous system all come together to form my emotions. I never really tapped into that to assess what state I'm in, and now I do that all the time, and I make choices according to what's going on inside of me. And I had never really thought about my impact on others the same way that I do now, and I really emphasize this throughout the book, that your emotional state is spread to everyone around you. So if you're walking around like a ball of stress, you're peppering that stress on everyone else around you. It's not only not good for you because it breaks down your body, but it's not good for everyone else as well. So it's really important that we try to get a handle on these things. And so I didn't appreciate how I was affecting everyone around me the way that I do now, and that alone is a pretty fascinating concept to think about. And I'm more present and aware. I look people in the eye more often than I used to. When we're in the frenzy of a day, people looking down at their gadgets, they're responding, they're disconnected, they're not engaging with a person anymore. And we're getting more and more like that as a society, unfortunately. I think we need to reclaim some of that more intimacy and that human aspect, because we need to connect with people, and that's how you then eventually get to know them and can begin to inspire them.
And in a corporate atmosphere, I'm sure that would lead to people feeling like their boss is hearing them.
Absolutely.
Just with the simple eye contact, right?
Yes, you read my book. Yes, everyone wants to be seen and heard, and if you're a disconnected way functioning with them, just checking your email as they're trying to tell you something that to them is important. Yeah, they're not going to feel heard. It's not going to feel good to them inside. And if that happens over and over and over again, you're not going to connect with an employee. Is not going to be engaged that way.
They're going to lose motivation to keep going.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Wow, that's a great observation. Awesome. And anything else you'd like to add? Other thoughts?
Gosh.
I know there's a lot. You cover a lot of topics.
I do. I wanted to make a comment about the millennials, since we talk a lot about them these days. I've been reflecting on this lately. And then maybe one comment about my kids. But the millennials comment is that, so I'm of the generation that grew up with this puritanical work ethic. We work hard, we're hard charging.
Yeah, I can't tell that about you at all.
we get things done, and no one's going to do it for you, so you got to go and do it.
Right.
And you lose something in that process, and I've come to respect this through my sort of time off, so to speak. And the millennials somehow are kind of the opposite of that. They lead with lifestyle, they lead with principle and values, and those things are important to them.
They stop and smell the roses.
They do, and so right now there's this big it's kind of a clash of the titans. Where the leaders of today are frustrated with how to engage the millennials and this. And I see it a little differently, like maybe we should come together and blend the two, and respect and honor what they're coming up with, because our way hasn't really helped our health and well-being very much. So if we embraced lifestyle a little more and thought about principle in our days and created conscious cultures and were conscious leaders, then perhaps everyone would be better off. But of course we have to get them to work and light the fire, and they have to produce too.
So it's, again, a balance.
So it's bringing them together
for
and
both parties.
How can we bring them together?
Right.
Yeah.
Also, and the comment about your kids? If that's okay with the kids.
When you start having the kids, it changes your perspective, as you know, as a mom. And when they start getting into school, which mine now are, you start to hear and see things about how school life is, and then you hear about middle school and high school and the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I reflected upon how my book can help that with the bad stuff, if you will. And I said to myself, I really would like to see a little bit of a shift for my children in the future. I don't want them growing up in a world where everyone takes anti-anxiety and antidepressant medication because they have no resilience and they can't deal with life. I really don't want them to grow up in a world where they take drugs to study because they're just pushed so hard. I really don't want them to grow up in a world where they're not seen and heard at work and they are treated like a commodity. So there are a lot of influences and value to this for all of us as parents, and to think about for our future generations, for our kids, and what kind of workplace do we want them to work in, and what kind of society do we want them to live in. That's about it.
Wow, I know. I'm still thinking about that. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. But awesome, and it's really cool because your work through this book that's coming up soon is just so unique. It hits a really interesting niche that's not just flopping through yoga poses for people who want to flop through a few poses, and it's not just a quick fix for the corporate world.
Yes.
But it's really such a nice amalgamation of a multi-layer approach for a wide range of people, like I've already mentioned several times. But what about, speaking of moms, for the moms out there who are feeling intimidated to start yoga, how many hours a day? What should they start with? Where should they begin if they want to begin without feeling afraid to start?
Well, yoga meets you where you are, so you just have to seek out the right class for you. So they have beginners series that I always recommend beginners go to, because it usually is about 6 weeks, and we have them here in Wellesley at Laughing Dog down the street, and at HYP, and you have 6 weeks together with someone. It's more discussion oriented. They're teaching you the poses and talking about them. So you're not just guided at the front of the room with someone that's telling you to move into a pose that you've never heard about. So it's really helpful to do a beginner series if you want to get into it, and then you'll be comfortable after that, I'm sure.
Awesome. Great advice.
That's my tip.
And there's more interesting advice, tips, and awesome news on www.tarramitchell.com.
Yes,
Is that right?
And my social media accounts,
and
Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
And it's Tarra, and Mitchell with 2 L's.
Yes, and my handles have an M in between for Marie, my middle name, because unfortunately someone else already had the Tarra Mitchell.
No.
Yes.
How dare they?
Someone else did.
The nerve.
I know.
All right. So that's Facebook and Twitter. It's Tarra.
Facebook and Twitter have the M in between.
Okay. Good to know. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tarra. This has been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure.
So much interesting information.
Yes, we could talk for another hour, I'm sure.
I know. We'll have to have you back on soon after the book.